All right, so we're a couple minutes in here. Let's officially get started. Thank you, Molly, for joining, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Whoever's listening and watching, really happy to kind of be starting this. This is the first Conscious Creator podcast, and really the goal is twofold for me in my life and where I'm at. Just meant to be partially a healing modality for me, getting out what's on my mind and what's going on for me in my life and sharing that with others. And then I think the second part really is having people like you on, having people who I would consider conscious creators, people who are doing things intentionally with grace, compassion, and creativity, in awakening people themselves, and just sitting in that authentic power. So my goal is to have everyday people. I think sometimes I get lost and we get lost in thinking I want to have an expert here and I want to have this person who knows everything about everything and they'll help me and somehow, things will get better. And I think sometimes we get lost in that because we, at that point, take some of the power away from ourselves. And I think we all have the capability to do the healing, to share what's inside, and that creativity and that power is within all of us. And I just want this podcast and these conversations to kind of be a reminder of that. So that being said,
I love that.
yeah,
No, I just want to say, because my friend and I were literally talking about this the other day. We have this term for entrepreneurs or people in their own fields that are in creative spaces like web design or artists, and we call them creatives. But truly, we're all creative, right? We're all human beings with the same capabilities. So I love that you're constantly bringing that back to the forefront and reminding us all that we all have that wisdom. We all have that power. So really beautiful message. I love it.
yeah, I appreciate that. And it is an honor for everyone listening. I hope I'll give you a better introduction in a second, but this is my sister. And it is a really good feeling. I think, first of all, Molly, you're my younger sister, and you're my friend. And I think something that's interesting is, anyone with siblings or anyone listening to this, or even older cousins, or there's some levels in our family of origin where if we have an older cousin, older sibling, so on and so forth, we kind of look up to them. We want to do what they're doing. We want to be good in their eyes. And there's a lot of pressure in that. I know I have that with our older brother. But I will say, Molly, I think you're such a good example of that happening in reverse. And the reason I really actually wanted to start doing something like this is because I felt that I was magnetized and attracted by your belief in yourself in doing something like this and starting your own podcast. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. But with that being said, I did want to kind of review and go over the theme of today's conversation, because I want to, with every interview, every conversation, have some sort of theme. So today's theme is believe in yourself and that power to help shape and create your reality. And so we'll go through some questions. We'll have some topics kind of later on. Before we get started, Molly, if you're willing, kind of help me set the intention for today's conversation. Let's take a breath, close our eyes for a second to really sit in this space.
Beautiful.
And we'll take one kind of deep breath through the nose. And then out through the mouth. We'll do that one more time. Deep breath in through the nose. And then out through the mouth. Do it one last time. And I'll be setting the intention for today. Firstly, just tremendous gratitude Molly, for coming on and doing this, for everyone listening. I'm excited to learn more about what you've got going on and your thought process through all the podcasts that you've been doing. In some respect, this will be like a meta conversation about, it's a podcast about someone who does podcasts, which is really cool. And just setting the tone for this being a safe space, and a place for you to share what's on your mind. And also, again, for me, feeling in my power and authentically okay being myself and sharing what's on my mind and just kind of getting it out of me and into reality. That's also just how I work. Power of stream of consciousness. It will just kind of flow. So I'm excited about that.
Totally. Yeah. And thanks for creating it's such a cool opportunity to have a really intentional conversation with a sibling. I was thinking about that before we just dove in here. Like what a special space. We get to really dive in here. And you're right. I have been podcasting and interviewing people, and there's so much familiarity and there's with our relationship, and this is kind of a new medium of doing it. So it feels really artistic already.
Yeah, I am curious how many, I guess, sibling pairs do this kind of thing. It could be rare, especially in this type of community. But I think I'm in, the place of my life of extreme vulnerability, of feeling my feelings and talking about them, which is I always thought it was maybe a strength of mine, but I've gotten to a place, and right now for myself, in a place of healing post breakup and post my own sort of facing myself in the mirror, and I think now in my life, knowing what extreme vulnerability and what it really means to feel your feelings. I thought I knew what that meant. And I think recently I'm finding out there's a whole nother layer to that. And I'm excited because I think for men, and getting a little off topic now, but for men, this is something that's not super common. It's not super common, I think, for men to be comfortable doing that. And I can't wait for future guests and have those types of conversations with them. But also family of origin, that at least in ours, and I'm not going to speak for everyone's, but in ours, that was not super common as well, to say, hey, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what's going on for me. Here's what I'm working through. And having that actually be a source of strength instead of a feeling of weakness or, I could say for myself, I'll speak for myself, and that a lot of years and a lot of times in my life, it felt like voicing that not only was a weakness, but like I couldn't actually feel safe using my throat chakra, right? Without getting too much into that just yet, but using my throat, using my voice to say, hey, here's what's going on for me. And I'm realizing how important that is for me, and doing something like this and having someone like you who really has been an inspiration in that space, I think will help.
Wow. Thank you. I'm just hearing everything you're saying about kind of where you've journeyed and healing. One, I'll just kind of quickly say for myself, you've mentioned before, you're my older brother, and you've really guided me in a lot of ways into my own healing, into my own kind of recognition of what has and hasn't resonated for me over the years. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for our relationship, that you are my older brother, one of my older brothers. And what a healing opportunity this is for us to meet here like this and be able to have these conversations. So I think it's a testament to all the work you've done and continue to do, the work I'm doing and continuing to do. And yeah, hopefully it serves as a inspiration, motivation, or a topic of interest for those listening.
I feel the same way. So let's get into it, Molly. Really excited to hear about you, and with sticking with the theme today of believing in yourself and having that really be able to shape your reality. What got you motivated? What sort of hurdles or humps or obstacles did you need to get through to start your own podcast journey and any other kind of healing journey you've been going through? Kind of excited to hear about that.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Well, the whole healing journey might be a lot to unpack. So I'll start with the podcast. I started a podcast called I'm Glad You're Here. I launched in March of this year. So at the time we're recording this, about 8-ish months ago. A few months before that, a friend and I were meeting up, and one day we're like, wow, this conversation kind of sounds like a podcast. What if we just hit record and see where it went? And we kind of recorded on our iPhones, and after a couple of those, I was like, what if we just uploaded this to Spotify and just like, for fun? And we're both
Right.
kind of timid about it. And after a couple, it might even still be up on Spotify. I don't know what it's called, but after a couple of those, it just kind of, sat there for a while. And I think a couple months later, I really don't know what hit me in January. I think I realized something in myself is I love connecting with people. Also, a little bit about me. I'm in the process of getting my marriage and family therapy degree. So this was right before I started seeing clients, a few months before, and I was learning a lot in school and really kind of connecting with my why behind therapy and just loving narratives and connecting with other people. And I've also been really excited about entrepreneurship and people starting their own businesses and how much mental, emotional, spiritual work goes into creating something new. And I think it was this perfect storm of having a creative itch, recognizing my own kind of passion and curiosity and interest. And I just got a bunch of ideas of how to have conversations around healing that are really transformative and less this kind of brutal, horrible thing that people go through, and more a really beautiful evolution that brings us closer to our authentic selves and who we're here to be and how that's always evolving. And we're kind of gathering more data from the things we're involved in, the things we're doing, the people we're talking to. So yeah, that's how I started. Some of the hurdles, there were so many little bumps and mental bumps, everything from how to even do it and who's kind of my model out here, to really just trusting my intuition and messing up a couple time slots and squeezing in interviews here and there and getting a little bit messy. But I think especially the first couple months, creating I'm Glad You're Here, part of that name was also for me too, to remember that it's perfectly imperfect. It's a process. It's not meant to be this crazy production at the end of the road, something that you can just dream of right now. All of it is kind of learning and growing with it. So I'm Glad You're Here has kind of been a mantra for me within the creation of it. Like, okay, that's also applied to me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm doing it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been really, really cool. A really cool journey. So I'm excited for you kicking off the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I think actually that resonates with me because I think I don't think it was an actual podcast episode of yours, but I think it was more so a post on your Instagram. I'm Glad You're Here. And that was really I think you were like undergoing some sort of facial acupuncture and it was some review of you kind of relaxing into that space of like, hey, I don't need to be perfect. And, we're both, and I'm sure so many people listening to this come from a place of fear of even getting started. Once you do get started, am I doing it good enough? Are people going to listen? There's all these expectations we put on ourselves. And I think there is that limiting belief to get started, which comes in the form of doubt. Then as you progress, there's just like continuous levels of, can I climb this mountain? And am I climbing this mountain correctly? So I think I really resonated with that post because I think you caught yourself, you sat down, and in that moment of, hey, I don't need to be doing A, B, or C or checking this off for anyone else. This is really for myself. I think you had one quote. I forget exactly what the quote was, but basically you forgot how much it was transforming you instead of like trying to transform other people. And that's really something I want to hear more about and talk more about with you, because in this frame of belief and how it shapes your reality, I think we get caught up and we get lost in how much we're doing things for other people or through other people's eyes, and realizing actually a lot of this transformation is for ourselves.
Oh, totally. Wow. First of all, it's cool to hear that reflected, right? And here's an example. Like sometimes in my mind, I'm like, do I need the Instagram? What am I supposed to post? I don't know, like all of that mental chatter that's caked in self-doubt. So I think that's just a great example on its own of hearing that reflected. That's reminding me of my purpose and my connection to this work. But kind of to that point of every conversation I've had on the podcast, I learned something entirely different than I think I'm going to or I'm anticipating. And I have a similar style to what you're cultivating here. Like there's so much spontaneity because there's so much unknown in the ways I'm going to grow. And it's such an exciting opportunity, whether, for example, the topic is facial acupuncture, but I end up in this like conversation on masculine and feminine energy. And I'm kind of assessing in myself what's my current balance with that? What am I kind of leaning into? What season of life am I in the middle of this conversation? And so it's such a trip, and it's so special to have these conversations with people who are so open to these like beautiful tangents and stories. And it's I'm thinking of that kind of the intention being believing in yourself. And with the concept of podcasting, with the concept of anything, and we're just looking at podcasting, there's so many twists and turns and so many opportunities for doubt and for reconsidering and kind of assessing values and what's working, what isn't working. My kind of current through line with believing in myself, I was very consistent with posting my podcast every week for a while. And I recognize I have a lot of podcast recording. I could do like for a full year enough to kind of supply every week. And at one point that was a big motivator for me to keep going. Like, oh, great. Like I have enough content. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it wasn't, because I was kind of changing in the process of the podcast. And I was considering like, who am I speaking to? Who do I want to be speaking to? Is it the same as the onset? And how am I showing up? Do I want to show up differently? And kind of to the essence of believing in yourself, I have had this really interesting navigation with I'm Glad You're Here, because I kind of slowed down on posting recently, but I've been really excited about how it's going to show up when it's ready to show up differently. And I'm kind of exploring in that, and it feels really good. And there are days and moments where I'm challenged by that kind of external validation. What are the numbers? How many people are listening? When is that episode ready? When is my solo episode going to be XYZ? So it's a constant practice and coming back to believing in yourself. But it's really cool when you can see kind of the mirrors of how you're transforming.
I think that's really cool. I mean, you hit on so many things there. The aspect of the mirror, the fact that the people we're talking to, the situations in our life, our relationships, are mirrors of ourselves, but also that we change. And I think that that's something, at least for myself, to learn more about, to hold more space for, and more compassion for, because I think in any journey in our lives, we have a goal. We set out, I want to do this, right? And of course, those goals and desires change, but we also change along the way, even within those desires. And I think there's this delicate balance between saying, okay, I've got a goal and I want to hit this and I want to reach that. And then having that space of compassion for yourself and saying, okay, now I'm X amount of time in, I'm 6 months in, I'm a year, whatever. It's not even time related. It's just self-related. and those milestones change and those targets change and the goals change. And so how do you kind of balance, from that starting point of whatever goal, whatever desire, whatever target it is, I want to hit this end point, to at some point saying, okay, well, now my frequency has changed, or now what I would like to do has changed, or the types of people I want to interview change, or the type of conversations no longer interest me. I want to change that to something else. So I think that's something I want to explore more. And I think it's this yin yang of, okay, I've got a goal, I've got a destination, I've got a target. It's something I really want to do. And that those are all true. And the other truth to hold at the same time is, well, maybe that looks different in a little bit of time. And maybe that gets adjusted and maybe that changes a little bit, and having that grace instead of saying, no, I'm set something, I've got to stick to it. So I think that's something that I'm kind of, I know I've done in my life with many goals and targets and objectives I've set with myself. And I think going into this, I'm so curious how that's going to show up for me. Like I knew that this would be such a good space for my healing. I think that I found that as I share these things, people have very similar experiences and people want to do something very similar. So I know that that feels good. And I'm also open and curious about how that's going to feel and how that's going to look after several of these recordings and after several of these interviews and after X amount of time. So I think that's an important point.
I love it. And I think that kind of key point, curiosity. Curiosity is this kind of non-judgmental lean into change and evolution. And it's funny because it's so common in the startup world, right? Like the term is pivoting, whether that's completely dropping the business model, adapting a new one, changing the look, or, like a famous one being Instagram, I think was more about like, they had online games and photo sharing. And eventually we're like, oh, photo sharing is where it's at. But before Instagram, there was nothing like it. Now we have TikTok and this and all of these mediums of sharing via video and photos. So there's so much power to pivoting, to evolving, to changing. I think when it comes to ourselves, it's very vulnerable too. Like, how do I change in front of others as I'm like adjusting? It's almost like a puppy that doesn't realize how long their legs are, and they're kind of like growing into their body and not fully there yet. So yeah, there's so many kind of ways it takes shape, but it's also so meaningful because if we didn't grow and we didn't change, it would be so boring.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And one of the things I want to chat more with you about is that process of change, that process of evolution and goal and target setting. And I think in terms of our theme for today, I think I can intellectualize a lot of things. And sometimes I can get into my head and I can say, okay, well, this is what I want to do. And I want to hit this target. And I think for the majority of my life, I've listened to a lot of those messages that have stemmed from my brain, my mind. And I've gotten so good and so accustomed to that. And I think this next part of my journey is really about learning to go into my body and about learning the signals that don't just come from my mind when I'm thinking about changing or I'm thinking about direction or I'm trying to receive signals, because that's all we do, right? As humans, we receive signals from the universe. Our consciousness is about absorbing and learning and growing. That's why we're here. It's the fractal of the universe. The sun ever expands. The earth is growing. People grow. Plants, life. That is the natural form of humanity, of reality. So I think, and I don't know if it's some sort of defense mechanism or protective mechanisms, but I do think many and most humans rely and adapt to, at least in the first part of their lives, the mental model of trying to protect themselves and use their mind to intellectualize and find safe ways and protect themselves from any external or internal dangers. And I think this next part of my life is, what messages can I get that aren't coming from my head, that are coming from my body? Because I'm finding that, we'll get into this. I'm sure at some podcast we'll dive deep into the subconscious brain and how your your subconscious brain is really connected to your body, and your body stores the information, it stores the emotions. And there's a lot of research
Totally.
and studies now where you can literally highlight different parts of the body that hold different types of emotions. So for example, the other day I had a fantastic breath work, and actually this new not a new men's group, but a new men's group that I joined, conscious men's gathering. Is really fantastic. But we had this great breath work, and one of the facilitators, Derek, was kind of leading us through an exercise, and I was breathing really heavily. And again, I think just for me going through this breakup process, I've been going through all these emotions have been coming through: grief, sadness, anger, all this. And during the breath work, I felt my glutes just really tense up. And I said, what's happening here? This is strange. I don't know what's going on. I'm, breathing heavily as breath work goes. And I realized, and I've got a couple friends now in this world. Shout out Melissa, who's really been helping me with this. But different parts of the body hold these different emotions, and realizing and Googling and doing some research that the glutes and the backside and different parts of the body really store and hold anger. And that was really interesting to find, that I knew I was feeling angry in my stomach for whatever reasons, but to have that manifest through a part of my body was really interesting. And that kind of brings me, I think it was episode 1 or 2, I can't remember, but I think you had Tara on, and she's the embodiment coach. That was one of my favorite episodes, actually listening to that, and it really hits home because it's particularly, I think, where I'm at in my journey now to become a little bit more focused and centered on the body. But I think just for me, being willing and having sort of the courage, I think that's the word I'm looking for, having the courage to listen to that and actually feel that. I'm realizing that in so much of my life, I have either distracted or avoided, or, through different modalities, sports, food, whatever it is, to sort of distract and not look into, hey, what's happening for me right now? And being appreciative of that. I mean, she talks a lot about this, and I really, it really resonated with me. But I think being grateful for your body sending you those messages, it's a form of communication, our emotions. And I'm just curious, what else you got from that conversation. If anything resonates or comes up for you as I talk about that. But it feels like this whole new world. And in some respect, I feel like I should have already been there. There's that kind of should, could, shame, self-talk. But I feel like there's this ocean to explore, and I can't wait to dive more into it.
Yeah. Oh, well, you said so much. So I kind of just want to take a step back and say, one, I see you. I see how much work you're doing, and that's really inspiring and really beautiful. And just to kind of make it a more kind of broad stroke here, the work that you're doing, I think, is so hard for us to recognize the need for it, because we're really trained in our society, and I'm going to make this whole statement, but we're really trained to think with our brains, our minds. We start school at a young age. We have university in the US, 9-to-5 jobs. We're constantly using our mind, and we're not really body based in our communication and our thinking and how we relate to the world. So I just wanted to say, I think that's a super kind of natural realization, oh, hey, I've got this body of wisdom and I haven't been tuning into it, and it's got so much here for me. And so, it sounds like exactly where you're at is really becoming conscious to it. I love that you researched where that was showing up in your body and
Right.
what emotion that's related to, because I think what comes with that is over time recognizing those cues and really truly trusting what your body is telling you. And to that point, I went to this amazing yoga class a little while ago. It was great in so many ways. And what's kind of standing out in this conversation is it was really a moving meditation. And at certain points, the yoga instructor was cueing, you don't actually need to look down at your feet to know that they're in the right position. Your body, if you need to adjust, Trust your
Right.
body to move your feet in the right position. You don't need to move your yoga pants, actually. They're Lululemon tight on your body. They're not going anywhere. So like we have all these ways of just like fidgeting and really not connecting to our body. And I love that cue of your body knows. Your body can slightly adjust into where it is. And I guess kind of coming back to the conversation with Tara, who is a really, really great example of someone who's been doing this work for a while. And so really kind of is a great example of what it looks like to be in your body. And embodiment is just such a really cool word of really, really knowing those cues that are and signals that our body is telling us. The fun kind of, or the silly story there is she was the first person I interviewed that I didn't know before. And this was also one where I messed up the time a little bit. I jumped in late. She was waiting for me on my podcast, and I wasn't necessarily sorry. I was respectful of her time, but I'm like, that's so bizarre that I missed this. I apologize that you're waiting. And so we started with breath work, and we started with really getting in the body. And it was also, a real opportunity for me to show up, I think a little bit at the time of recording, a little bit more in like a future version of myself that would be deeply calm and integrate kind of what we were talking about. So I kind of, I guess, looping back to how impactful these conversations have been, it's also been an opportunity for me to kind of assess like where I'm going, where I can be, and and really receive that from the guests I'm speaking to. I need to sip a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
My body is emotional.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I need a little bit more.
Yeah, take your time.
The other thing I want to say with Tara is she's also someone that I got the chance to meet in person. And that was a few months after we recorded. Tara lives in Canada. There was a women's festival, and she posted about having extra tickets for volunteers, and kind of coming back to that concept of like being magnetized to someone's, to how someone's living or showing up or believing in themselves. There was a huge part of me that's like, I want to see this in person and really connect with her. And it was an incredible weekend. Just a women's festival in Alberta, Canada, beautiful nature, really grounding rituals and practices, but also to meet someone and then feel so seen and known by them. When you see someone that's so embodied like Tara, it makes you feel safe immediately. Yeah. And kind of goes to show you how our own healing work is infectious and heals others too. It's really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's connected to the idea of energies and having our own spheres of influence and auras and rubbing off on each other. Seems like she has a big influence on your life in a positive way. I know just listening to her for a little bit on your podcast was rewarding. That stands out to me. Any other people that you interviewed, or I'm curious just kind of about your journey as you go through this and talking to people like Tara. Any of the other ones kind of stand out to you, just like kind of really rubbing off on you or resonating with you, that a topic that you didn't know much about? Obviously, you had them on your podcast. You want to learn about them and share what they do. But did one of those kind of pique your interests in a way that you didn't expect, or you heard about it for the first time, or you just started digging into it and like, whoa, this is something I really need to like look into?
Yeah. Okay. One, I just want to say I've loved every conversation, and for so many different reasons. What is standing out to me is something that kind of I took on as a project. We kind of alluded to the facial acupuncture before, but back when I was really ideating on the conversations I want to have and really kind of getting that creative mindset, like, this is healing and that is healing. And this is a cool conversation. I thought about gua sha and acupuncture, and I found this woman, Jen, and I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, I have this podcast, would love to kind of have this conversation on how this is a healing modality. She's like, great, let's like hop on Zoom for a second and just chat. And we had a super, super depthful conversation around how subtle the work of acupuncture is. More specifically, how she's doing it differently. And one, at the time of that conversation, this sounds so funny now, but I had only done acupuncture once or twice, and it wasn't really something in my practice. Now it's something I love so much. It is such a juicy, delicious practice. But at the time it was just a curiosity. And again, the podcast has served so much in the fact that I get to experiment and explore, and I have kind of that purpose and that drive to. But we had that conversation, and she goes, I think that, you should come in for a few treatments and kind of see what it's like so that you can speak to it from your experience. And, would love to have this conversation. She was really excited to share her perspective on acupuncture and beauty standards. And again, a really, really great episode. We recorded another one recently about facial reading, which is another layer to her work. But that was something that I was like really investigative over, and it's a slow process. And we scheduled a month out and then a couple weeks later. And actually I had my second facial acupuncture right before I got engaged, which was really cool because we were looking at how my face was changing to actually match my authentic self.
Really?
And I scheduled that right before my engagement. I kind of knew the timing-ish, and like, I really, really want to feel the most myself. Let's do this. Got some needles, had a great session with Jen. And so that's one that really stands out in terms of like the dedication to that episode.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I've done acupuncture a couple times myself, or I should say a few times. I've done a couple in community setting. I think I did one or two one-on-one, and I benefited. I think that it's something I kind of want to explore further and dive deeper into and understand kind of how it actually impacts me. I think it's a kind of a question or a thought I have with any of my healing modalities and different methods and modes of operation is, how does this actually impact me? How does it actually affect me? And kind of tracking that, I think, has been kind of new for me on this journey. And I guess I'm curious to hear from you. You've interviewed all these, man, I don't know the word for it. Like, I guess healers, impactful people, right? I'd like to call people on this podcast conscious creators, but in some respect, and in a very similar vein, a lot of these people are conscious and creators themselves as well. Are there things, we talked about acupuncture a little bit about embodiment. Are there things that you've kind of taken away from your interactions or from your sessions that you've added to like your self-care routine? Are there rituals now that you feel like you can't live without? Is there something that was added to kind of your repertoire? You're like, oh man, if I knew this, 5 years ago, I'd be a totally different person. Removing the shame and judgment part of it. I'm curious because you had so many interesting people come by.
Yeah, well, definitely to that last point, if I'd known this 5 years ago, I think every single conversation, well, it's easy to say they would all change my life. I don't know how much I would have been able to hear, right? And how much I would be able to hold from those conversations. Wow, yeah, there's so much, and I've been thinking of finding a way of really finding like the common threads in these episodes and almost like piecing that together as an episode itself. So if I find that, I'll do it, cool. And it'll be great. But something that is constantly that I'm reminded of in almost every conversation is kind of the cycle of nature. And I wanted to touch on this before, so I'm happy it's coming back now. But when we're talking about growing and changing and morphing into something new, if we look at nature, things die, things get replanted, things grow, but there's seasons and there's change. And do things grow exactly the same way? And do they need to be beautiful? And that theme, just with every person I've talked to, for some reason, I'm reminiscent of the microdosing episode I had with Aya, because I think that was the first time I was really struck by the cycle of nature and talking about microdosing and a plant and just kind of stripping away all of the conditioning or thoughts around psychedelics versus antibiotics. And it was really kind of powerful conversation in terms of my routines. I think it's just really kind of continuously shaped my identity. It's helped me kind of see where I'm currently at compared to where I've been in a really loving and tender way. That's kind of what really stands out to me. I think every conversation I've been so curious and interested, and it's been really, really impactful in ways I'm not even fully aware of yet. Everything is still taking its course in me and brewing.
Oh, I love that. I think, and it's interesting too, right? Because we think of like, okay, I want to learn this, or I want to be at this certain point. And I was reading this book. I think it was, I forget the name of it exactly. I'll try to link it somewhere, but it's like how to 10x instead of 2x, I think was the name of it. I'll pull it up. But I think the idea, and it's so healthy, it's about not measuring ourselves based on where we're at and where we want to be. It's measuring ourselves based on where we're at and where we've come from. And I think that that's a lesson that I really need to have, because with all the things I want to do and all the places I want to explore and all the goals and objectives and boxes to tick in my life, it's so easy, I think, to get caught up in that and lost in that, and to just take a second and say, wait, compare where I was X amount of time ago to where I'm at now. Really been a tremendous journey, and being grateful for that. And that's, for me in my life, instituted, gratitude journaling and a lot of the meditation practice that I do is to remind myself of that. And I think as we go through this journey and we learn all these healing modalities, we talk to all these cool people, and we add all these skills to our toolbox, just being gentle with ourselves instead of saying, oh, I wish I had that sooner. Or I wish I learned about that. Say, wow, look at where I've come from. There's been tremendous progress here, and being thankful for that. I did really enjoy that microdosing conversation. I'm a big shroom fan. We don't have to get too much into that this episode, but the amount of insights and
you're giving us all these little teasers of future conversations. I love it.
Oh, heck yeah. This is how you draw people in, right? You gotta reel them in.
Totally.
Definitely we'll have an episode on that because it's been a life-changing experience for me. And it's been a huge outlet for my creativity. I consider myself a creative person, and I love to write poetry, and I love to kind of get things out there. But sometimes it doesn't necessarily flow to me as easily. Like I'll need either good music or some sort of like combustion engine to get it started. And that's where, for me, psychedelics come in. But I guess I'm curious for you, kind of like next step on this journey. I know you've had a lot of, you like ramped up really quickly with the podcast. You had a lot of great episodes. I think you mentioned you're kind of slowing down a little bit or just posting a little bit less. Are there additional topics that you're excited about talking, getting people on the podcast, talking more about? Is there a certain area of your life or a healing modality or part of your journey that you just can't wait to kind of dive into?
Yes to all the above. I have like a running list when I come up with an idea. I recently interviewed someone on the mechanics or like the emotional space of wedding planning. And I have another kind of topic on how, a brand can be this like conscious creation. So what is kind of its story, or how does it define its voice? How do you kind of collaborate with a brand in that way? Those are kind of just a couple that come up for me, but something that I'm currently, like super, super inspired or curious about is lately I've recognized that I've done a lot of really cool work in a spiritual realm. For me, I naturally really gravitated to sound healing and yoga nidra, which is a practice of deep rest. And those kind of two practices really dovetailed me into this whole vortex of what else is here and where do I go, and kind of swimming in that. And I recently kind of recognized that we're Jewish, our family's Jewish. We have that kind of Judaism in our roots. And I've felt connected to Judaism in a cultural way. When I think of the religion of Judaism, I have so many questions of how do I bridge the gap of my spiritual practices? How do I want to connect that to Judaism? What is meaningful? And so lately I've been kind of recognizing how personal a Jewish connection is. And I'm getting really curious for myself on like what rituals in Judaism I want to implement. Are there prayers that are like mantras that I can use that kind of feel more connected to my lineage and my ancestors? And just kind of opening that door. There's so much there. And just to mention like judgment or shame, it's also, it's always a hot topic to be Jewish. There's so much to unpack there. So it's really big and deep exploration, but an area that I want to go into. And kind of to cap that for now, I'll say two things that really jumped out to me recently. One, I've been like, I want to create a daily meditation practice. And I was searching all over for the perfect meditation. And finally, I'm like, wait, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to set a timer and just do it. And in one of these meditations, the one thought I really kind of fed myself in it was I recognized that we have this prayer in Judaism called the Shema, which is really a call to oneness and connecting to the fact that we're all one. We're all kind of in God's image. And to do that prayer, we put our hands in a shin, which is the first letter in the Shema, but we touch our third eye. And I thought that was, it just helped me kind of plug in and start to bridge that gap. And gosh, you know what? There was another one and I totally forgot it. So if it comes back, that'll be great. And if not, yes, I do remember it. It's,
there you go.
I said yoga nidra is this practice of rest and restoration. And I realized that we have Shabbat as a weekly ritual for rest.
The Sabbath.
And restoration. The Sabbath.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so those two have been kind of, I'm seeing how I'm making those connections, but it's taking a lot of conscious effort. And that's kind of a whole area for myself personally that I'd like to develop.
I love that. It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the growth between growing up in any religion or belief system to kind of evolving to your own, to making the connection back to the roots in a way that makes sense to you at this stage of your life. I'd consider us two very spiritual people, and you're a little maybe more connected to the religion aspect than I am, but we all kind of find our way back. And the fact that you're using where you're at now and all the progress you've made, all the healing you've done to like, hey, wait, this actually makes a lot of sense. Or here's how I can connect my current place and all the current learnings that I have to what I didn't fully understand as a kid, or what felt like repetitive process without really an understanding. And you can do that for yourself now. And that's really neat. I mean, I feel similarly in some of the more, I guess like more spiritual or intellectualized part of Judaism for myself, at least like Kabbalah. That's a big thing for me that came out. I think there's so much in numerology that's connected to Kabbalah, and in the spiritual world. So that's been kind of fascinating. I have so much to learn there, but connections to, okay, this is another podcast coming up, but in the numbers in the numbers world, how important 369 are, and the divinity of those numbers, and Nikola Tesla using so much of the combination of those numbers and vibration, frequency, and energy to create his inventions, and fascinating. But I think the point is, in our journeys, being able to find and relate our growth where we're at now to those belief systems or structures that we had as kids, or that I in some respect were programmed, because we didn't choose a lot of that. As kids, 0 to 7, 0 to 10, whatever it is, we're not consciously choosing a lot of that. We're subject to the whims of parents or caregivers, or society. So now that you have the capability, awareness, understanding, maturity to either close gaps or to dive into it, I think is going to be fun. Like, it's just a fun, exciting adventure.
I agree with that. I think actually what I'm realizing is I have been rejecting Judaism for the last couple years, maybe more than a couple years, but it's been there, but not something that I really have wanted to question or assess. And as I do that, something else that really, the word God felt so weird the last couple years. I use universe and spirituality, spirit. And lately I'm like, what is so loaded about God? If I diffuse that word and I know I'm using it interchangeably with universe and spirit, it's a beautiful word. It's a synonym for universe and spirit. And to your point, like something that we were taught in elementary school was, if you're writing God on a piece of paper, it's G-D and you can't throw it out. Right. And the way that I'm relating to that now is like, that's such a numbing way. Like if I'm writing G-D, I'm not actually connecting with that word. It's kind of just whatever. But what's so bad about writing that and connecting and kind of feeling that, that presence, that connection deeper than, hey, it's just me here. So there's a lot to kind of navigate within the religious aspect of it. But I think all of this journeying is really, I think for me, kind of pulling out the practices that are important to me, that help me feel, again, connected to lineage, ancestry, connected to this sensation of oneness and collectivism. So, I'm curious to see how it'll take shape for me. No idea.
I love that for you. I mean, at least we got 2 additional podcast ideas coming out of that. I think for me, reconnecting spirituality to religion, and then numerology or any other esoteric connections we have with Kabbalah and Tesla and all these other really cool aspects. Okay, I've got one maybe final question for you before we start wrapping up and just finishing with our theme of believing in ourselves. What do you feel like going through this process of creating the podcast, having these really intelligent, insightful, helpful people on, and interviewing and learning all these different modalities and gaining this knowledge yourself? And for all your listeners, what's one thing you've learned about yourself through this process, and one thing you really take pride in as you've gone through this journey?
Something I've learned about myself. Okay, this is, really personal, and yet I think a lot of people can relate. I think what I've learned is, maybe there's a lot of momentum at the start of a project because there was nothing for me to compare it to. And over time, there have been so many opportunities to hide. And I love, for myself, I've learned kind of by numerous ways, whether it's someone's feedback on how a certain podcast resonated, or my own inspiration in the moment of doing a recording with someone where I'm like, this is just so beautiful. I want to post it. It's been kind of recognizing, how for me, this kind of discomfort and really showing up and really being different, quote unquote, comes up in really, really fascinating ways the further you go with it. And it's really, I'm really excited because, like we've kind of touched on, maybe we haven't, but kind of, it shows up in one place, but that shows up everywhere. And so the way that I'm kind of healing and coming to terms and recognizing and working through that via podcasting and interviewing and posting and navigating the changes myself, like I know that also informs me as a future marriage and family therapist, as potentially a mom, as a friend, as a community person. So I love that. I know as I continue doing work in the podcasting, it's a beautiful little example of the lessons, the downloads, the ways I integrate things, and it helps me see how it shows up in other facets of my life. So it's really fun. A creative project is really kind of, in a way, like a test of all the work that you are doing. And it's really fascinating, to see how it shows up to test you, and how you accept the test and move with it.
Wow. Yeah. Test and integration is what I'm hearing from you. So, wow. Very powerful. What can I say? I'm so happy that you're here, that we did this. I'm so grateful that not only are you podcast number one, but that you're my sister and my friend. And I have to say, I've learned so much from you. You've given me courage in my own journey. You've motivated me. And I think as long as you just continue doing what you're doing, you're going to help a lot of people. And I'm very proud of you. I'm very happy that you're here. And thank you for giving me about 5 to 10 additional topics for future episodes.
Anytime.
Yeah, came up very naturally. So we'll close out the session. Do a quick grounding. Thanks again, Molly, for coming. And thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah,
Talk soon.
And just kind of to give it back to you, thank you for embarking on this journey, both for yourself and for everyone listening and involved. And I'm really excited to continue to find ways to collaborate and to learn from each other. And I think it's a really, really cool form of expression. So I'm really excited for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Molly. Love you. Thanks.
All right.